My name is Bruno Justi, here with Music Cosmos and Be My Ears. Very excited to be here today in front of these incredible professional artists, musicians, composers to talk about music for games. Thank you again, Wilbert, ROGET, right? I got it right this time. Antonio TEOLI, thank you. Toby, thank you again, man. Thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. Before we start our panel, I'm going to share my screen again and make a few announcements. So bear with me for a second. Okay, here we go. All right, just a little background for those who are joining for the first time. Music Cosmos is an initiative by Be My Ears, which is a platform still in beta test where composers and songwriters discover the commercial potential of their music through crowdsourced feedback from listeners and industry professionals. The whole process generates a report that's very deep and detailed about the music and the impact that the music creates on listeners and professionals, right? As I said, and Music Cosmos was born shortly before the great shift of reality that we're all experiencing for the past few months, for the past year. And it's basically a community where forward-thinking artists, industry professionals, and brands can come together, network, showcase, and learn from one another, right? So this is the essence of the work that we do, the essence of our community. Although we're meeting online, I really encourage everyone to ask questions and interact with the panelists through the Q&A box and through the chat that we have available on Zoom. So do that, interact. And as a matter of fact, there's also a spreadsheet that I like sharing at the beginning of the panels for those who are watching the panel. If you guys feel like sharing your contact information and collaborate and network with the other participants, feel free to do that. It's super cool. Usually we have a lot of people sharing their content there and collaborating afterwards. So do that. I also love bringing to the meetings a few numbers, right? So from all of us watching these today, and again, we have people from all over the world. So people will be watching now or later today or tomorrow in their own time zones. So we have 70% of us are composers, songwriters, 14% of us are industry professionals, people who work in labels or A&R companies or managing artists. And 14% of us are musicians, guitarists, singers, pianists, and things like that. And we do have people from Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada, China, France, Germany, India, Iran, Ireland, Italy, Lebanon, Mexico, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Russia, Singapore, Sweden, Trinidad and Tobago, UK, USA, and Uruguay. So it's a very huge collective of artists, and it's super cool. We do have a few panels coming up, but this one is very special. It'll happen on April 12th. We're going to be bringing Liane Lund. She's the head of studio at Riot Games. They've done a bunch of incredible games. And Jess Furman, she's creative director and VP of sync licensing at Sound Revolver and Big Noise Music Group. So if you're interested in knowing how these agencies operate, these will be a great panel. So I'm going to share also the link on the chat box later. So feel free to register if you're interested in joining. And lastly, just a little announcement about our first Music Cosmos Composer Competition. We are announcing at the end of next week a shortlist or semi-finalists. We have 50 composers who made to the semi-finals. We're going to announce at the end of next week. And then in a week from next Saturday, we're going to be announcing the finalists. so that the public will be able to vote. And then we'll know the winners by April 2nd or the 3rd. I'm not really sure now about the date. It's on the website, so feel free to go there and check it out. And for those who love social media, look for these guys online. They are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Those are their handles. If you like taking screenshots of your phones or computer while you're doing the panel, do that and tag these guys, reach out, connect with them because they're accessible, and I'm pretty sure that they would be happy to, answer to questions or interact with you guys in the social media world. So without any further ado, let me stop sharing my screen. And what's happening here? Good. Boom, done. Welcome again. Let's start this conversation. Let's start with you, Wilbert. Tell us a little bit about you, about your work, the work you do. And I think the most important thing, what inspires you to do the work that you do?
Yeah, I've always been incredibly inspired by games and game scoring, and I feel super lucky that I get to do it as an actual career now, and not just as a fan. But yeah, it all kind of started. I grew up playing piano, and then I discovered Final Fantasy VII back in, I think, 9th grade. And it just kind of all went from there, basically. I got into game scoring, all throughout high school and college. And I joined the Game Audio Network Guild and went to the Game Developers Conference and made a lot of connections, and eventually ended up at LucasArts, where I worked on lots of different types of games, but mostly a lot of Star Wars titles. And when LucasArts shut down, I kind of started my independent career as a game composer. And then that's how I ended up working on Call of Duty World War II, Lara Croft, Temple of Osiris, and Mortal Kombat 11 most recently. And also still working on Star Wars Vader Immortal, the VR experience as well.
Beautiful, very inspiring. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah,
TEOLI, would you mind sharing a little bit about the work that you do, your inspirations? And you're muted, just so you know.
There we go. Thank you. So hi everyone. My name is Antonio TEOLI. I'm a game composer. I started doing music for video games professionally when I was 16 to 17 years in Brazil. I've worked in a bunch of games, like hundreds of games in Brazil, and some games here for the US and for Europe. But one of my last projects is Good Job, which was developed by Nintendo and Paladin Studios. I was also working on a bunch of games such as Stormbound, Dolmen, Taikodom. I'm working on some games for VR right now. And I'm also the creator of The Amazonic, which is a sample library company focusing recording native instruments. We just recorded 100 instruments at the Amazon. And I also have Game Audio School, which is a school focused in teaching game audio for people in Brazil. We are expanding to the US right now. And what inspires me, for me, it's always the story. I like to say that music is basically the storytelling reach out for the audience through musical notes and telling them what they should feel or not. And that's always the first one thing that inspired me. And my dogs.
Beautiful. Just to clarify, when you say Native Instruments, is not the company Native Instruments, correct?
No, Native Instruments from the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, so
if we may call.
Yeah, and it's better, as I've had the opportunity to try. If you guys want to give it a try, there's a trial version or like a starters package on the website. It's super cool. I'll share here the page as well later for people to check it out. Thank you again, TEOLI. And
yeah, I also have a pretty classic story, I guess. I began as a young child playing the piano, but then my first main instrument was the cello, luckily, because it's probably the most awesome string instrument. sadly, I stopped playing because I decided to switch to the electric guitar because it was cooler or something. I totally regret that, but yeah. I also fell in love with early role-playing games. It was Breath of Fire 2 in my case at the Super Nintendo. It was amazing, and I was like blown away. And then yeah, I don't know, I somehow decided to just try that. I also studied music production and was struggling around and just working day and night while working on festivals at the day and working on scores at the night, and just tried doing things. And I specialized in composing for small indie teams because I kind of like the personal way or the private way. If you are interacting with like 2 or 3 other people, and it's very close. And I also do stuff for areas where you wouldn't expect music at a first case. For example, I did a 20 or like 25-minute score for a sci-fi novel for Mr. Jason Michael Primrose, who's probably watching right now. And yeah, it was amazing to retell the story of a book with music. It was pretty cool. Yeah, and I'm glad that you invited me to that talk.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I have like dozens of questions that came through the forums, right? And I think that maybe 70% of people asked this very direct question: how do I get a start in the composing for games? Wilbert mentioned at the beginning when he was introducing himself a little bit, like you were part of a musician's guild or something like that. Does that have anything to do with how you started your career in composing for games, Wilbert?
Yes. So I think that the common thread among, I mean, so, okay, you can ask that question 70 times and you'll get 70 different answers for like whose big break or whatever their first, whatever it was. But there is a common thread, which is that someone who was in some sort of a position to suggest a musician was friends with the composer. And real, like, actual friends, not like, oh, we met at a convention and said 2 words, but like actual friends. They talk, they know each other, etc. And they suggested this person, and the composer had some sort of a demo reel or something on that made their music accessible. And it was well produced, and it fit for whatever it was that this big break project needed. And they were hired because of it. And that's kind of the general concept. And so if you kind of break that apart, there's sort of 3 parts to it, right? There's one, like, you have to have solid work. That's not negotiable, unfortunately. And it's sort of one of those things where, you know, there's always going to be more equipment that you want to buy. There's always going to be more production money that you want to spend. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about the ideas and the details. And if you have that, then your chances are quite good. So as long as you're kind of not selling yourself short, but just saying, well, this is what the industry standard is, I need to be at least slightly better than that, then your chances are decent. The next part, of course, is being available online. Someone should be able to easily Google your name, and then all your stuff pulls up, and that's, you know, the whole social media thing. But the most important is making those friends. And that's why I joined the Game Audio Network Guild. That's why I went to the Game Developers Conference and worked on a lot of like indie and mod projects that unfortunately didn't really go anywhere. But in doing so, I ended up working with a lot of different people, a lot of sound designers. Like, for example, I got hired at LucasArts because I'd worked with a sound designer, Damien Kastbauer, on an indie title. And he then got hired as like a contractor doing some tech work for the audio engine on Star Wars Force Unleashed 1. And while being in-house with that audio team, he found out that, hey, you know, we're looking for another person on the music side to do some music editing and general kind of music assistant type work. And he just kind of said, well, why not this Will ROGET guy? And then eventually I was contacted about that. I interviewed, and kind of the rest is history. It just sort of went along that track. And while I was at Lucas, I tried to befriend as many people as possible. Because it turns out having a LucasArts badge makes it a little easier to, you know, reach out to people and talk and whatnot. But nonetheless, 5 years of that. And then when I was out on my own, I had made that number of real connections of friends that, you know, I'd collaborated with or had real conversations with. And that kind of snowballed from one gig to the next. And yeah, it was all about those friendships.
That's awesome. You mentioned something that's really cool, and I believe like Toby, we were talking about it briefly, right? Toby is very active on social media, and that's how I started, like, you know, recognizing his music and his work, because I would see constantly like his work on this group of composers that I'm part of, and then, you know. Can you just touch a little bit on that, Toby? Like how do you feel about the work that you do? Like using social media as a platform to promote your work, has it helped?
It was everything. I'm not very good in making a lot of connections and friends, since I'm more like an introverted guy, and so that wasn't a good possibility for me to go around and talk to people and stuff, or call people. Never call people. It's like, no. And so, but you still somehow have to make the people know that you are actually there and that you are good. And yeah, I of course began with a way that a lot of people may do, like writing like thousands of mails to, I for example, took the Steam game developer list and just wrote all of them and sent them my reel. But they get like 1,000 of reels every month, and that's not the best way. And so I just began uploading stuff. And as I already said in the pre-talk, you have to put visuals to it. The people don't want only music; they want to see something for some reason. But somehow the most important step in my career for now was that I, kind of faked projects. Because in the beginning, you are standing there. You can say, yeah, I'm very good in composing music for games, but you don't have any game to show. Of course, you can get a few very small projects, but probably these games aren't that awesome, and you can still put all of your effort into that project, but it's not the best showcase. Everybody wants names. That's a problem I have, because the names of the games I composed for aren't like, I can't say I composed the score for Mortal Kombat 11 or something. That's awesome, but still I'm able to compose music for a lot of games. And so I began just, I was like, yeah, I'm composing a score for this game right now, and I'm doing this and that. I'm doing that leitmotif and stuff to implement this and push that feeling, and to boost that part of memorability and so on. And somehow that made Smaller devs think, I want that for my game too. I could explain what I had in mind and what, because a lot of developers, I think, don't know the real possibilities that music delivers to their game. It's like, yeah, I need music. Okay, I am going to get that $30 sample pack or something. And that was a way how I was able to convince quite a lot of people that music indeed is a huge chance to, for example, boost the memorability of your game and the whole audiovisual project. And yeah, I'm sharing kind of everything. It's everything that made me allowed to pay for my life. That's not how you say that, I guess, but to pay for everything with creating music.
Yeah, we get the idea.
Okay.
That's great. That's awesome. TEOLI, do you want to add something to that?
Actually, no, man. I think, Will and Toby, they answer amazingly well. I don't think if there's anything to add on from my end. I just think the whole, connection is very important, like legit connections, not fake connections, as Will explained very well. The social media presence, it's very important, even though I personally hate it. because I'm like, oh my god, I'm seeing some friends of mine like spending a lot of time creating content for Instagram, and I admire those guys. I'm like, man, you are my hero. I can't. I'm just a little bit lazy about social media, but it is very important. And of course, as we and Toby say, like having your skills, very sharp for when the necessity comes, you can deliver, and you better make sure to do the best job. And that's pretty much it. I think it's like this combination of three elements, like be present, and like be present, and that's it. Make good connections and make good music.
Do you feel like
that's like
do you feel like, because I would also call you like an entrepreneur, like a music entrepreneur, right? You're a founder of a company that creates virtual instruments, and you have your education institute. Do you feel like that also helps?
It does helps, not just on the financial side, because sometimes you might be a little low in projects. You have some passive incomes from schools, passive incomes from virtual instruments, but it also helps you to really expand your mindset, which for me, like I think Will and Toby might agree. I personally, I love to create whatever. Like my favorite toy when I was young was Lego. And I still love Legos nowadays because I love to create. I love to see film stuff, like, building stuff. But music is the thing that I love the most to create. But it's not the only thing. Like I love to create other stuff. I love to paint. I love to, try some business here that are also, of course, connected to music. So I think it's important for the financial side and your sanity as well, like to really expand to other business, and it's just fun. It's just like for me, life is just a very nice ride, and you gotta try everything. That's what I believe. So I think it's very important. Yes,
that's beautiful. It's cool that you mentioned, and I believe WILBERT as well, right? You do have a company that you provide instruments. What's the deal?
Formerly, like I founded Impact Soundworks like a million years ago, but now the only work I do is like cashing in royalties for the libraries that I personally worked on. So it doesn't, I'm not going to say that it's making me like tons of money, but it's passive income, which is really hard to come by as a game composer. And so I'm really, really grateful for, for that sort of dependable income source coming in. Because that kind of lets me be a lot more independent with the work that I take on. I mean, especially sort of when I was getting my freelance career up and running, however many years ago, it definitely was really, really helpful.
That's awesome. You both touched a little bit on another question that we had here. What do you guys, what's the process, for example, when you're not working on like a big project? You have like this gap, I don't know, a month, maybe a few weeks. What is the process? Do you go and compose more music? Do you just like clear your head and go to the mountains or the forest, or what's the deal?
Antonio, do you want to start up?
I was like expecting to go first.
I'm trying to remember, like, when's the last time I had a break?
Well, I can tell for me, like 2020, when the pandemic starts, it hit me pretty bad because I was like some ongoing projects, and pretty much all of them were postponed, and some of them got canceled. So I was like, wow, oh my God, what's good? I didn't remember the last time I stayed like a couple of months without work, and I was like kind of weird. So the first week was weird. The second week I was like trying to figure out what to do, and for me it was a great moment to really work on the tech side, like for example update my template, update some of my libraries, etc. And then also like make sure my side business, my school online, the Amazonic, everything was going well, was up to date. So it was good to like make sure everything was like running well, and that was good because this is something like you you don't feel like doing when you're like crunching and composing all the time. You just know that this stuff is accumulated on the background.
Yeah.
So you gotta like say, oh my God, I have to fix this. I have to work on this. Oh my God, my template needs to be fixed here. So I had this, every time I feel like something is bad or wrong or need to be improved, I have this whole list on my Apple Notes. So I tackle everything, and that was it.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty much, that's what I do. And of course, hikings on mountains always helps as well.
Nice. Are you in Brazil, or are you?
No. I'm in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I cannot go back to Brazil right now because Brazil is kind of like a kind of crazy situation regarding the pandemic. Now it's bad, really bad.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah,
I want to hear you guys.
Well, yeah, like what I was going to mention was like just trying to remember some of the last times that I had a little space, and yeah, you know, having any sort of back burner creative ideas, creative concepts that you just say like, later on I'll do this, and then like it's like, well, I have a gap of time now, what do I do? So I remember maybe 5 years ago, I did an anime album for a show that did not actually exist, but I was a big fan of anime music. I love Joe Hisaishi, Yoko Kanno, and Yasunori Mitsuda as well. And so I did an album that was really just me finishing off a bunch of songs that I had like maybe done a verse chorus of or something, but never actually completed. And yeah, you know, I had artwork commissioned for it and released it. It's silly. It's not good music. Don't find it, please. But it was a great way to learn a lot of production. Later on, I was about to start Dead Islands 2, the score. And I knew like, okay, this is going to be a very guitar-centric score. I am the worst guitarist in America, like easily. But I had a score that I did back in high school that was very guitar-centric because it was like MIDI guitar. And so I decided, well, why don't I take the action music from that, which is very like Mega Man rock, double speed kind of stuff, and I'll just produce it like a real production now and record all the guitar myself. And if I can make it through this, then I'll be ready to do the actual Dead Island score, because that wasn't coming up until like months later. So I did that, and it was incredibly useful. Just learning how to play, like physically forcing myself to learn these ridiculously hard songs, and more importantly, learning how to edit, because you better believe this was like me doing like one beat at a time. Okay, now chop, next edit, one beat at a time, next edit, you know. But those sample libraries as well, you know, Vocalisa I did in my spare time, kind of somewhat during my time at LucasArts, now that I'm thinking about it. So I'm not really sure I'm allowed to say that, but I guess the cat's out. What are they going to fire me? Like, come on. Yeah. And that was an amazing project too. I never did sample library. Oddly enough, I know this is going to contradict what we said before. I've never done them for the money, honestly. It's more just there's something that I want and it doesn't exist yet. Which is why I so admire what you've done with these, you know, native instruments from the Amazon, because that's so perfect. It's like something that you wanted, and you wanted to do it justice, but it hasn't really been done before. And that's I think what sample library development should be about, rather than it just being like, let's get the next hottest wave of whatever. Yeah.
Awesome.
I have to mention, by the way, like before we move on, Toby, I love your videos so much. Like if you haven't had a chance to check out Toby's videos, they're so gorgeous. I'm super jealous of your studio. I'm looking at it now and I'm like, man.
Thank you. That means much to me. That's nice to hear. I didn't know that you actually watched that. As I'm already talking right now, I just drop into that topic because I thought about what TEOLI's, I forgot how do you want to be named? TEOLI? Is that
TEOLI,
cool?
Man. Call me whatever you want, man. TEOLI.
All right.
TEOLI's fine.
TEOLI. Yeah, you said that you kind of, you can't always compose. And maybe that's like, I think a bit younger than you two guys, and I'm way more fresh in this business. And I always have the feeling that I have to. It's luckily, it's fun every time, but I have that feeling the more I compose, the better I get. That's how it is, of course. And so I always am like, if there aren't any projects right now, I just like, okay, then I have to use that time as good as possible. And what I do a lot to use, well, what I did a lot throughout the last few years is to recreate scores. That's probably a thing where you can learn so much if you have a game or something that you love, where you love the music. For example, a breakthrough moment for me was when I listened to the score of Octopath Traveler. It's not the greatest game, but it's probably one of the greatest soundtracks. It's the king of modulation, I guess. It's and I had to rescore. I'm not that good in gaming actually, because if you play a game, it happens so often that you have to jump into your studio and to recreate that stuff the composer did. But that's so valuable if you sit down and try to recreate the whole track as good as possible with all the elements and try to understand what he did and why he did that.
Absolutely.
And then look at that game and okay, that makes sense. It's so and it's fun actually. That's something I do pretty often if there is some free time. And since I don't have any side projects, there's composing for other things besides games, but I don't have sample libraries, compres, or Warner calling me. But so there's a lot of time. And
that's very valuable. I love the idea behind rescoring, or like copying, let's say like copying the project just to learn in the process. Transcribing the process. And I guess there's a lot of songwriters here or musicians. There are some people that I know actually who are playing bands or they're artists. And I guess it's the same process as, like your songwriting, or you want to learn how Beatles developed their whatever, a song in their record. Is the same process that you guys probably do while you're studying game compositions, right? Like you're definitely listening, writing, taking notes. And so that's really valuable. And it ties to one of the questions that we have too, like how do I start if I don't have any portfolio, any chops developed? I guess that would be one of the things, right? Is there any other thing that you guys would?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because like whenever I recommend, people ask like, oh, how do I get better at whatever? The first thing I always say is learn to transcribe. Transcription is how music was taught across every culture on earth, actually, if you think about it, for centuries. Sometimes obviously not always written down, but like as oral traditions, or even in the classical world. I mean, that's how Beethoven, Mozart, that's how they all learned how to write, was by transcribing, taking it down, listening to music, and then figuring it out note by note. And just as Toby said, it's how you learn what the masters, what they did and why they did it that way. When I was first starting out, I did a lot of transcriptions of Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 scores into general MIDI. And I think that's honestly what taught me how to write music. It's a great way to learn orchestration, because in general MIDI, you don't have the compressors, you don't have EQ or anything like that. So if there's a sound that you want to get and it doesn't exist in general MIDI, well, you have to start getting clever. You have to combine instruments. You have to maybe use the attack of this instrument with the sustain of that one. And guess what? That's literally what orchestration is. Because you can't put a compressor in real life on like a human being. It doesn't really work that way. All you have is dynamic and instrumentation. And years of doing that, I think is what is the exact way I learned how to orchestrate initially. But beyond that, I mean, it seems like before every single project I do, I try to find something to transcribe that would help kind of bring me into the mindset of the project. I mean, before Mortal Kombat, I did a lot of Taikodom performance transcriptions just to make sure that I was doing an accurate sound that wasn't just like, Hollywood BS, but it was actually how it should be written. Before every Star Wars score, I would transcribe a cue from Star Wars, from John Williams' work, just to get myself into that mindset of, okay, this is how he orchestrates. It's a different style than what is common in the modern era, but obviously it's it's fantastic, and it's a great way to think of music making. And I can't say what I'm working on now, but it's a lot more in like an electronic style than usual. So I would do transcriptions of, I probably shouldn't say, but like certain kind of modern hip hop and EDM tracks, just to sort of make sure that like, okay, well, do I know how to make this sound?
Yeah.
Okay, I got that. Now what about the form? Okay, let's figure that out.
You're basically learning a language so that
Absolutely.
when you go to China or Japan, you know how to communicate with people, you know how to order, right?
Yeah, transcription is like the Rosetta Stone of music.
You mentioned that you're working on a project now that's like more EDM. Like, do you guys feel like, for example, your specialty is randomly, right? Like it's pop music. When you have a project that's kind of a little bit outside of your realm, do you guys usually work with other composers? Do you have assistants that come in to kind of like bring their expertise? How do you deal with that? Or do you do that? You just go and transcribe, you learn the language, and then you try to apply it?
I just start. In most of the cases, that's one of the advantages of these small teams. In the best case, it's something new. I won't create part 8 or something of a game that already exists, where you have to, kind of stick to that sound that already exists in kind of a way. And that's the most amazing process for me, if you are able to collaborate with the devs and create a completely new, of course, there's something, nothing new, but a new soundscape and a unique sound for that world that makes it shine in the best possible way. And that's why I love these small projects, because they are very often interested in that. And so we talk about that. It's not like they say, do this and that, or I say, I can do that. It's like, I send a first very rough version of a track, and then we talk about that version, and we talk about what could be added and what could be could happen to make it fit even better to the world he or she is trying to create in that moment. And so in that case, it's more like trying to jump and deep dive into that world that's being created right now, and kind of converting it to music, or making it stick together to that audiovisual product that has to,
So basically, you're saying that you're more like into being part of the creative. Your music is part of the creative process, and it's not just like a.
In the best case, sometimes there isn't enough time, and there are clients who are like, I want that Hans Zimmer sound or something. I need that mega horns, otherwise it won't work. And of course, in that case, it's like WILBERT already said. I ask for their favorite songs, for example, or what games they like and what they want it to sound like, and then I listen to that, I study that, and then I still try to add that spice or something, or I make offers. It's that means that it's more work, because I try to make an additional offer or something. Often I send 2 versions, one based 100% on their expectations or wishes, and a second version with some bonus ideas by me. And sometimes they like it, and if not, I still did some music and learned something.
Awesome. Would anybody want to add something to that?
Oh my God, those guys are killing it. Those guys are the best, man. There's great answers.
There is more here. So like you just do you guys reutilize things that you compose for projects, and then you start a new project and you go and like you have like your own library where you pull stuff from, or no, you go from zero every time?
It depends. I mean, like you could make an easy argument that I've been using the same orchestral template since like 2013. It's kind of every project iterate. I mean, this is actually something like I try to have at least one experiment per project when I'm doing an orchestral score, where like on the technical side of like how I'm doing the mock-ups and whatnot. And sometimes they fail, and I'm okay with that. Like, you know, on the, maybe I shouldn't say, but screw it, I just will. On the Star Wars Vader, I've tried this thing with saturation where I think it was like I was taking the close mics of the brass or something and using that to modulate the saturation amount on like a very basic saturator in Reaper, and something like that. Didn't work, but the reason why was because I was a little too heavy-handed, and you know, it was something that I thought like, okay, this is how it works in real life. Why isn't this working in my, you know, mock-up? And I finished the score, and it's in there. I mean, if you ever listen to that score, I didn't turn it off or anything. I said, well, let's just do the whole score this way, and it doesn't sound terrible. It's just not what I had envisioned. And then the next game, one of my current projects, I was like, okay, let's take a step back. How do I make that work? And I took it off of like the strings. I think I was using it on strings, and that was like, all right, let's not do that at all. And I think now it's only responding to the close mics of the brass rather than the whole brass section. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. So it's only saturating the close mics, which is like even closer to like what happens in real life, right? Like, because, you know, they get so much volume, so many SPL or whatever that they can buzz a little bit. And it's way better now. Now it's like, okay, now we're talking. Now it's getting a nice 3D kind of sound that I hadn't had before. So it's, you know, you kind of take these things, and then there's other stuff like sound design. I do a ton of musical sound design, and I like to kind of save them out to a folder for every individual project. Same with my DAW uses is Reaper, and so there's track templates and presets and whatnot. So I try to be somewhat disciplined in like saving things out. If it's like, hey, this is actually pretty useful, why don't I use that again and in some capacity. And so yeah, things come up, absolutely. You know, it's good to, I know some composers like to start with a completely blank slate every single time, which I have a lot of respect for that, because I could never, I would go insane if I had to do that.
If I can add something, I'm the same page with Will. It's like I have my template as well, and sometimes music. I don't like to say the music is bad or failed, because I believe the music just didn't match the necessity. So what is bad music and what is good music, right? It's just like a matter of perception and being useful for the project itself or not. So I personally keep a lot of my not used tracks. And what I do, I add some metadata to my projects to make sure, like, okay, sad, tears, river, piano, etc. So sometimes some project arrives, and sometimes it's a small project, and sometimes the budget is very small. And you know that that music that you wrote 2 years ago might work really well, just need some adjustments. It's an original piece. You just adapt to the game, and that's it. So I have a bunch of like previous tracks, not previous versions, but previous music that I wrote that didn't work for the project, and they're there, just waiting one day, hopefully, to see the sunlight.
Yeah.
I think it's for me, I think it's helpful to keep those, and at least for me, I don't know you guys, what is your like process of composing, Toby and Will, but for me, I start composing everything. I don't touch any musical instruments. I compose everything using my iPhone and a voice recorder.
What?
That's my process. That's
cool. That's something it's pretty interesting. It's like sometimes when I'm walking around outside and I'm like, whoa, that's the best melody in the world. It isn't probably, but then I'm singing around. But I wouldn't actually start a production with just humming around. That's awesome.
Oh, dude, it's like because for me it feels like if I start composing the music through the piano, I'm definitely gonna rely on my muscle memory, and I'm gonna fall in scales and stuff like that. And I am a horrible singer, possibly the worst horrible singer living in the US right now. And I'm super out of tune.
We need a duet
But
between your singing and my guitar.
and your
yeah.
guitar. So basically for me, like I record, I go like, and I go, okay, and then I record after. Okay, these should be shuffle, drums, bass, walking bass, and I go, okay. So I start to write the melody. I start to add the instruction of the vertical orchestration on my cell phone. And believe it or not, for me, once I press stop after I recorded, I really somehow convinced myself that, okay, I have the music. I have it. You know, and my anxiety just goes away. And then all I have to do is try to identify the super out of tune note that I just sang and play the melody and some chord progressions on the piano. And I also have some music that didn't work as well, or I didn't end up recording some other thing. And I have lot of hundreds of melodies here on my vocal memos. It's my most precious folder, more than my photo folder.
That's an AI app possibility right there. If you're a bad singer, just like sing whatever, the app will convert this with autotune into something amazing.
Yeah.
No, I'm exactly the same way. I mean, I don't usually do the phone thing, but I have like score like notation paper just everywhere.
There we go.
Like on my desk, I have a bunch of different notebooks, and then pocket notebooks that I carry if I go outside, and pencil. Even in like literally in the shower, I have waterproof Post-it notes that I can. But I'm not kidding. No, I'm dead serious. Waterproof, yeah. You would be.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
How much of I won't name names, but like how much of my music that people have heard was written.
You never know, man. You never
very
know.
wet nudity. But no, it's great. And what I love about it is that like you're not beholden to reality. You know, as soon as you play a note on an instrument, it's now in reality. But if you're doing like humming into a phone or like writing on paper, it's just completely in your mind. It's like it can be anything. Even when I'm doing stuff that has nothing to do with orchestration or anything, like an EDM track or something like that, I'll still write it out on paper and then maybe just describe the sound in words, or in like sometimes I'll literally say like, okay, use the LFO to do this thing, and then, you know, whatever. And then, you know, it's future Will's problem to actually make that into music. But it's very liberating, and it sort of lets you come up with ideas that I don't think I ever would have been able to do if I were like sitting in front of the computer and trying to get all this. And interestingly enough, another technique that I've used recently, specifically for the EDM stuff, is like, maybe I'll have a general sketch on paper if it's like the melody or rhythm or whatever. But sometimes I'll go into the DAW and like pull up a microphone and then just scat the drums. This is what the drums should sound like, you know, whatever. And then the bass line, and then I'll layer that. And then here's this like whatever. And now I have something that sounds like a joke, but it does give me a sense, you know, of multi-track sense of what the piece should sound like. And then I'll just replace one layer at a time with the real synthesizers and production and whatnot. And it works really well. I think I heard that like that's literally how Timbaland does all of his productions, is he just gets into a microphone. He's like, he just hears it and he just kind of does it piece by piece. Michael Jackson as well.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty interesting that you guys seem to put much more preparation before you start working on the track than I do, because it's not like that I sit down and play the piano and play all the different melodies with that piano, but I totally enjoy. I have a rough idea in my mind, maybe more like a feeling or something. Then I just jump into the project, and it's like a weird feeling. But I totally love that. Maybe you know that if you have that idea and you already maybe recorded 3 main elements of the track, maybe only like a chord track as a guideline, and then it's like, okay, there can that add that instrument and that, and you switch from instrument to instrument and load more VST than your work machine can handle, why it's the best feeling in the world if you're just in that flow while creating. And that's why I prefer just sitting down, playing a few chords with an instrument that might fit, but that it doesn't have to fit that vision, this feeling, like I said. I just go with a jump into the pool and just begin. And that's, I don't sit down and write things down before I start working. It's like, maybe I should do that, but until now, I really enjoy that feeling. And I think it's not like, as you said to something else right in the beginning, there isn't a right answer. So you just have to, especially for questions like that, you shouldn't be like, okay, he's doing it like that, so I should do that too. You waste a lot of time trying to copy that style. And so just do whatever you want. Maybe you are a guy who likes to play the recorder for everything before starting the track. I wouldn't recommend that, but if that's your way to go, just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. It's always like, I'm always surprised by like how some people, not just in music composition, but also in visual art. I have a lot of like environment artist friends who work in video games and character artists. And it's sort of like there's two types of brains. One is that like that sort of jazz improvisation of like, I'm just going to dive right in, no plan, and I'll figure it out as I go. And it takes a lot of, I think, two things. One, a lot of faith, and also a lot of really solid focus and memory that I don't have. And I know for a fact that I will forget, and I'll go down the rabbit hole of, oh, I need this violin thing to sound like perfect. Okay, you know. And then once I've spent a bunch of time on that, then I know I'll forget where the piece was going, and whatever that like creative spark that was the reason why I opened my DAW in the first place is just gone.
But I have to say something. If you forget something at that point when you focused on that violin, I always think like, okay, then it's okay. Then it wasn't the best idea in the world, probably, because I forgot it while working on that violin. And that, but if you can't handle that, if it makes you sad or something, not the right word again, but I hope you understand. Yeah. Then of course it isn't your approach, because that would lead to nothing. But I, in that case, am always like, yeah, okay, then it's gone. I'll take the next idea.
Okay, yeah, I mean, again, it's absolutely, it's totally valid. Yeah, it's just sort of like, you know, it's fun. I think one of the things, the other part of it that I didn't mention is that, especially when I'm working with orchestral scores and it's like these mock-ups that take forever, and you know, because of the way orchestration works, sometimes you have to re-record. You know, I play everything in. I don't ever copy paste. So it's like I have to like play the same line 15, 16 times, and it's just this extremely tedious process. And so it's like, for me personally, it's like it doesn't matter what the idea was, I will completely lose it. Okay. Once I'm like 7 doubles in, and I'm like, okay, now the wood, you know, all that kind of thing. Whereas if I'm just writing on paper, the other advantage is that I have a much better sense of time. So it's like, since I'm not spending so much time on like just this one section, I'll have a lot more to draw from, and a lot more kind of ideas, more of a sense of like, okay, this is how someone who's never heard the piece before will experience it, hearing it for the first time. Whereas if you're kind of, or if I personally am just going down the rabbit hole of going all these details, it can be easy for me to lose the big picture, I guess. Is kind of why I ended up doing the sketching thing. But I would honestly say, I've asked a lot of people about this, it's literally 50-50 of the people who dive right in versus the people who do some form of sketching first.
Yeah, I think it's really cool what all you guys said, and it ties back to one of the questions here too. Like, you know, if you're not a composer, if you're not in that area, for example, if you're a drummer or a guitarist starting in that world, I think this is a great process. Like you sketch everything, and maybe if you're not a cello player or a string player, then you can potentially hire or have a friend come and play, so you can kind of start forming your compositions so that you can start like building your own portfolio and so forth. And two questions that are kind of connected to what you just mentioned. One is from Taylor. She actually wrote it here. She asked, how much of your work is virtual orchestration versus live players? All you guys.
100% virtual, but I dream of having an orchestra playing my stuff someday, but I didn't have the possibility until now. That's, yeah.
Oh, I would say the vast majority of my productions are 100% virtual, but sometimes when budget allows, I always invite someone to, like, you know, recording a violin or a cello on top of some like specific instrument that might receive some kind of like a little bit feature. One thing that I like to do as well is a little, you know, trick. It's like when I'm working with choir, for example, I also like to add sync a little bit on top, just to bring some imperfections. Yeah. So it just like helps. Even though I am a horrible singer, again, like just
I was gonna bring it up.
Yeah, fix a little bit, put some effects. As we'll say, you gotta be good in editing, man. If you're good in editing, you're good. And
Melodyne.
Yeah, it's like, that's the thing. And I think personally, like, imperfection is like the key. So if you don't have a budget to record real orchestra, try to somehow bring imperfections that won't sound wrong, but will kind of sound like organic. Like for me, for example, I've used a lot of rolling, the C-board. So I can play a little bit with the micro pitch in some of the instruments, just to bring some like lowering, like, and like, oh, there you go. That's now like perfectly everything in tune. So like this brings a little bit of imperfection. But I feel, I'm assuming, Will, you probably recorded some orchestras, right? You recorded.
Yeah, I mean, like the Star Wars Old Republic, all of Call of Duty, the main theme of Mortal Kombat also was live orchestra, and like some other little things here and there. It's great. It's the most stressful thing you can possibly imagine. Think about this. I worked out the math. You ready? Every second costs $5.
Ooh.
Every second that you spend in that studio costs $5. So you have to like adjust your sentences. Like, okay, how do I, the take just ended, how do I, you know, condense my feedback as quickly as possible, because every second is $5.
So there's a great question here. Like, does that money come from your budget as a composer, or there is a side budget for studio, etc.?
Great question. It always depends on the project. Like for Call of Duty, they had a completely separate budget for that. I mean, I'm still sweating, but like not as profusely. But Mortal Kombat, we did the main theme in Budapest, Hungary. And it was a remote session over like Skype and like this audio thing we did. And yeah, that was all self-funded. It was, I think we had about an hour of studio time. And yeah, you know, you got to imagine, like, so here I am, the contractors were German, and then the players were all Hungarian, I believe. And, you know, here I'm talking in English over Skype. So it has to go all the way to space, all the way through the internet, then down to Budapest, and then to these, you know, German dudes talking amongst themselves, and then translated to Hungarian for the conductor. And then he's talking to the players. And so, yeah, long story short, your score needs to be immaculate, no questions. Yeah. You have to be extremely efficient with your time. Choose your adjectives very carefully, because if you tell like the horn section one thing and they interpret it another way, then guess what? That's another, you know, 2 minutes of recording time down the drain. Yeah. And, you know, the clock is ticking. But that said, even for the scores where it is going to be a live orchestra recording, having very solid, convincing mock-ups is super useful. Part for like, if you're working with an external orchestrator, it's useful to them because they can hear what you meant. You know, like they're only going to get like MIDI notes, and those tell only really half the story. But if your orchestration is or if your mock-up synthesis, whatever this word is, if your mock-ups are convincing, and they really portray like, this is not only what I want, but this is how a real player would perform this, then it's like, okay, now I see exactly what it's supposed to be. And it's more like a transcription job for them. They're just listening. Like the orchestrator I usually work with, David Ships over in Nashville, he, I mean, he looks at my MIDI files, of course, and they're all cleaned up and whatnot, but he's really just listening, and he's trying to hear like, okay, this is what Will meant to write. You know, the MIDI notes are giving me this, like the notes, but here's what the dynamics are supposed to be. Here's what the vibe is supposed to be. And he translates that spectacularly well in his orchestrations. He did my Call of Duty scores and Destiny as well.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Very inspiring. The second question that came through earlier was about the length of music that you guys produce, create, compose for games, because there's a lot of repetition, right? So for example, if it's a platform game, you're not really sure how long the character will be there on that phase. How does it work for you guys when you're composing? Do you think of the length of the scene?
You always have to kind of. That's the thing that the difference of a game to for example a movie. In a movie, you always know what will happen at minute 76 or something, and you can use that, and yeah, it will always be the same time. No matter, okay, the viewer can press pause, but that's it. It will always be the same. In a game, you have to look at so many things. You have to keep so many things in mind. The player could actually just stay at that position for like 30 minutes because he enjoys watching at these walls and stuff. And it's a huge thing to talk about, but let's keep that on the length. That brings us to dynamic and dynamic music and interactive music, where you don't work with regular like MP3 files and stuff to generalize that, but you go, for example, with WWIIs or Fmod, and you have like the most simple way to explain that, different layers. That's one approach that you can take. Different layers of instruments, for example, that join a loop or something at a specific situation. For example, the basic example, Gothic 1, Wolf comes like 5 meters to the player. It enters that area around the player, and the drum track joins in. It's like it was muted all the time. And you have to think in different parameters, and you can control all of them. What daytime is it right now? Where are characters? And it's that was the most interesting thing about game music, actually, I guess, because you are allowed to create dynamic stuff. That was a pretty basic explanation, but it's into the right direction. I guess maybe one of you two guys wants to proceed right now. No?
All right, so I think Toby nailed, like it's pretty much like narrowing down everything that the game can offer and see how the music can better fit the game. And I personally, on my side, like when I start a project, I really ask a bunch of questions to my client. Like, okay, tell me about your game. First, tell me the story. Now tell me the message you need to send. Now tell me or show me if it's allowed, or if they are on the stage that they can show something. Show me some concept so I can like analyze, first of all, like color palette. Are we working with hot colors or cold colors? What is our target audience? Are we working for mature people or like teenagers? What type of orchestration are you expecting, or arrangement? Or if this person, the client, doesn't know the answer, I'm gonna try to always suggest orchestrations or arrangements based on, like, if the game is too colorful, I usually believe that the orchestration should be as colorful as well. And this kind of stuff, like what's the time the game is situated, and then I ask, okay, so usually what's the average length or duration of every level. Let's say if it's a level-based game, let's say a traditional platform game. Oh, every level it's around 5 or to 7 minutes. All right, so I'm gonna suggest, I'm gonna say, listen, I think maybe we could do like, if we do linear music, at least 3 minutes, at least 3 minutes. If you want to work, or if we can work with dynamic music, you know, we can maybe make like a shorter music, maybe to feed your budget, and then we can add dynamic music and add like, do a more like block composition system using Fmod or WISE, and then also try to understand what the hooks are in the game in terms of like, okay, on this section, we can like start this instrumentation. So I think, I don't know if, I think those guys, you know, Will and Toby will agree with me, like, at least for me, it's like there's so many answers that I need to have answered before I start putting my first note on the keyboard and it's starting to, like, I really think it's important to structure everything and the ideas and have like the perfect, not the perfect, but I mean the grand view of everything, because it will directly influence your composing process.
Yeah, and those are great figures that you had. Like, I know that some games, they don't really have the capacity for any kind of a dynamic system for whatever reason. And so having like a lengthier queue is perfect for that, because it's like, if you just don't want it to loop over and over again every 60 seconds. One of the things that I think also is important is if you do get a chance to play the game, to see the spots in the game where the player might get stuck, or figure out like, well, okay, we have this level and this is the music for the level, but at what point is it going to just, no matter how well you did, at what point is it just going to get a little bit stale and you need something fresh? Like when I was working on Lara Croft Temple of Osiris, they actually gave me a PC because I lived in San Francisco, like nearby the studio. So they sent me home with a PC with all the game's dev tools. And I was basically just another developer who happened to also be writing the music on my own computer. And so I would play the game without any God mode or anything like that. And I would find these puzzles or areas of the game where it was just like a weird difficulty spike. And what I found was that, okay, if I just change to a different piece of music there, then it's much more encouraging, because it's almost like a conversation that you get to have with the player, saying like, hey, okay, we know it's hard. We know it's probably going to take you a little while. Don't worry. This is intentional. And it kind of, it's weird because it's sort of like, it's something that doesn't really exist in film scoring, I don't think. I don't think you have that direct line to the player there. Whereas in games, you can do that all the time. There was like a whole system we developed for puzzle hints, where like, sometimes in the game, the puzzles would take like 2 or 3. You have to pull this lever, and then you have to fight these dudes, and then step on that ancient Egyptian contraption, whatever. But like each step of the way, there would be a little, something just to say like, okay, you're on the right track. You're not finished yet, but keep on keeping on, and you'll eventually get there. And I thought that was really helpful in making sure that the player always felt like the music was custom scored to their experience. But at the end of the day, all that really was we were taking a step back and we were saying like, all right, let's plan for like a much more big picture approach to this level, not just saying like, all right, here's the level, here's the track, next level, but instead like, no, let's kind of plan things and let's see what the player's journey through the level will be.
This
That's
difficulty
great.
thing is so important. I thought about the Celeste something I studied a few months ago, because it's so amazing. Celeste is a pretty hard game. It's very hard, to be honest. But
very hard.
And it's so great. You have to write music that somehow keeps the player motivated and still fit the scenery. And what Celeste did is it's so amazing. I don't have the name of the composer right now, but
Lena Rain.
Okay, thank you. It's so great. We have that main leitmotif that's connected with the main character. And the character, you should play the game, it's awesome. I don't want to spoil anything, but she changes. Her mind changes or something. And this leitmotif or that melody connected to her, that theme connected to her, changes with that changes, connected to that changes that she goes through. And a lot of people say that they like the music of Celeste, and probably a lot of them didn't notice these particular changes, but still it worked because the composer had a specific plan and the word and did it awesome. That plan.
And you know, like if I just add one thing about Celeste, which it's great. The Celeste Fmod project is available to everyone to download.
Really?
On Fmod's website, so you can download. Dude, if you love it, you gotta check it out because you can download the real Fmod project that they used in the game, and you can check all of the music dynamic systems they created for the game. And on the notes section of Fmod, there are some commentary from the developers telling what they were thinking, you know, like how they structure. So it's a super, super resourceful project to have. So it's literally the whole audio project from Celeste on the Fmod's website. It's really cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. There's another question here from Corey. We're gonna go up to the anonymous attendee in a second, but like Corey asked if there are any specific words, terms, phrases, or formulas for how you usually get notes from developers or directors that would help you to determine, you know, the kind of music to make. Anything like technical, maybe, that kind of like
how the developer should describe his wishes? Oh, I'm not sure if I 100% understood the question. If it's about that, I think it's super hard to talk about music, but at the same time, it's super easy because you can use all the words. Like if you say, yeah, I want that flowerful sound, I want it to be a bit more flowerful or more fluffy. I don't know. You most of the time you can use weird words and you kind of know what the person means. And
because in film and TV and in commercial, like usually whoever is producing or directing, the terminology would always be that can you make it a little bit more blue or a little bit more red or bigger or smaller, right? So in games it's probably the same thing, right? There's levels of knowledge of music, so it's kind of like hard to
it changes. It always changes. But as I already said, even if the person you're talking to never heard about music theory or something, that doesn't really matter. You can just say some adjectives he has in mind, and somehow it will probably work. And if it doesn't work at the first attempt, you can still talk about that. And at least I didn't have any problems to communicate with clients until now. So,
I'm not sure that I could say what's the specific of like, do say this, but I can tell you what not to say. And I think that the most discouraging and kind of unhelpful is when they are using musical terms, but like either just using them completely wrong and saying something, but they mean the literal exact opposite of what they just said. Or when they're, you know, going so deep into the details of like, okay, well, actually your melody should do this and like have this part here. That's the worst, because it's like, would you like to score the game for me? Like, you know what, why did you bring me here just to move a mouse around? It's that's never terribly helpful for me as a composer, because at the end of the day, it's like, you know, I'm not turning anything in unless it's like, this is the absolute, like, this is the best I can do given the current parameters. And so then it's like, well, change this thing, but no explanation of like why, just like, okay, remove this, remove that, change this, whatever. And it's like, why? that's like not useful at all, you know.
Not to mention when sometimes the feedback comes from multiple people that are not aligned with themselves. So sometimes you have a feedback from the producer that has nothing to do with the creative director, that has nothing to do with the lead game designer. Everyone is trying to like throw, you know, a lot of suggestions, directions, opinions, and you're like, what the hell am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Right. And there is like a psychological side where you have like to play like a circus clown. Like, okay, let's try to find like a common spot in here and make everyone's helpful. But I've been into not just one project where the producer and the director, and of course I'm not gonna mention name, but they were like not in common good terms between themselves. They wanted completely different things, at the point that they were emailing me like, the director was like, can you please tell the producer that I wanted the music that way? Producer be like, can you please tell the director I want the music? Like, oh my God.
We want names. What are the names?
That'll be the end of my career. No, but
it was Scorsese, wasn't it? I knew it.
But it happens. So
yeah, it happens. I mean, you know, all you can really do is try your best. I mean, you know, like what I always say is that like your job isn't to write the best music. Your job is to write the best music under the parameters that you're given.
Yeah.
You know, you might not get the budget that you want. You might not get the time that you want, and you might have you know, certain diplomatic issues with you know, directors, producers, whatever. But you know, your job is to take all of the revision notes that come in, all of the, you know, whatever, and just still try to stay creative and artful, which is incredibly difficult. I mean, you know, when you're talking about revision number like 14 of like 1Q, and you still have to be creative, you can't like just be like, man, screw this, just click a mouse or whatever. Then you know, it's very difficult. That's honestly the hardest part of the actual writing usually. Is kind of dealing with that. And you know, it's funny because like I'll say that, but then there definitely have been times in the past where I was gung-ho about something, and you know, the client was just like, no, change this to, you know, whatever, and I was just like, no, I hate, you know, whatever, and then it turns out that they were right, which just makes me even more angry.
Yeah.
I was like, dang it, I hate the fact that I was wrong and that they were right about this. But like, you know, it happens. You know, everyone has these different perspectives on music, and I think that if clients focus on emotional terms, or thinking about, and even, you know, kind of reversing it on them, like taking a little bit of a step back and trying to understand, well, why did the composer do it this way, and realizing that at the end of the day, gamers aren't really playing games and thinking, oh, this game score is great because it feels so appropriate, but instead they're thinking more like, this score is great because it sounds great. When you kind of have that mentality, then it's a little bit easier to have a good working relationship. I mean, like I will name names right now. On Mortal Kombat, they almost let me get away with like anything. And the reason why was because we had an amazing director, cinematic director, who comes from like the 90s action film world, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And you know, he there's no pretense at all, and you know, he doesn't hold back. And it was a perfect fit for the style of music that I wanted to write, which was that kind of 90s throwback, you know, not the much more reserved modern kind of thing, but just saying, hey, you want an orchestra? Bam, here's a giant orchestra, choir, huge synthesizers and world instruments, and just everything all at once, and not holding back. And we had an audio director who's a composer himself, and he had great ideas, but he was super respectful. And he basically said, hey man, you know, surprise us, make us, you know, have a smile on our faces. Here's our suggestions of what to do and when, but you don't have to do that, you know. And getting that freedom, I think, is what made MK probably my current favorite score that I've ever worked on, because it was so liberating to be able to explore all these different fields and try to kind of surprise not only the player but also the clients really with what I was doing.
Wow.
Gorgeous, beautiful. You guys touched on a couple of things again from the questions here. One is budgeting, right? I think it's a very important question. Maybe more for people who are starting, how to budget, you know, like if you're working on indie games, or again, if it's a game that doesn't have like a budget, like would you do it? If it's something to build your portfolio, like budgeting in general, how do you guys go about budgeting? And I'll go to the other question after these
I think I'm in the nearest position to that people that are starting, since my journey began only 8 years ago or something, and I'm able to pay for that stuff since 3 years, I guess. And well, I used to accept everything in the beginning, and probably you should. I'm not sure about that. But you only can learn. But right now, I still accept projects that are horrible underpaid. But only if there have to be a few things fitting or something. It has to be something where I believe in. I have to feel passion, and I have to get a feeling like I can learn stuff, and that could be actually an awesome game. And I want to support these two guys that worked since 2 years on that game. And but you for sure shouldn't accept everything, especially if people are trying to abuse. I'm not sure to abuse your services, because it's indeed a pretty harsh business. There are a lot of people running around being composers and stuff, and a lot of people who dump the prices because they are on, I'm a hobby composer, now I'm going to compose music for a game for $10 for like 30 minutes of soundtrack. And because of that, you shouldn't support this dumping stuff. And also because of your mental health and stuff, you can't work infinitely, whatever. I had to learn that too. I was like, okay, I don't need to sleep because I can work more, so I can exact that job for less money, but still do that. But it won't work for 10 years straight for sure. So it's like, you always have to figure that out. There are projects you should accept if there isn't enough money available in the indie field, I guess, if it's a really awesome project and you have a good feeling with that one. But you shouldn't get abused or something. That's not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing you can do is like, you can sort of say, all right, well, here is my rate. And this is what you have to absolutely have to pay me this rate if you need like a full buyout of the music. The company owns it, they can reuse it, they can put it in the sequel, they can put it in the trailer, whatever. But from that point, when you say like, okay, well, they can't pay that because they're too small, indie or whatever. Well, now we can start playing this sort of balancing act between rights and the upfront pricing. So you can say things like, all right, well, I'll knock it down, this much %, but now I get to sell the soundtrack on like Bandcamp or Spotify or whatever. Or go into the lower and say like, okay, well, now I can use this music and create, like submit it to like music libraries, relicense it to other projects. I keep the rights to the music itself, and I'm just licensing it to you to use in this one game. But you have to pay me again if you do a sequel or trailers, has to be something else. You can do things like that. You can actually be very clever in the contracts. You can actually even give bonuses for different console releases. So you can put in your contract like, hey, yeah, we were only thinking about PC, but the game, is pretty popular, and now you're putting it on PlayStation. So I get X $1,000 as a platform bonus, I think they call it. And you can kind of play that game, and I think I absolutely agree that it's worth it to figure out how to negotiate for those cases where a game is solid and it just seems like something that you want to work on, that it would expand your portfolio in a really good way, or maybe that you would learn some cool new thing that you hadn't had an opportunity to do before, but they just don't have exactly as much money as perhaps you would have wanted.
I was muted. Do you guys feel like it's part of one of the questions here too, do you feel like that there is a standard you should stick to, like especially when you're beginning? Should I stick to whatever, $1,000 per track, and if you offer me less than this, I'm not doing it unless the project is amazing, it's inspiring? Do you think there should be like some sort of, or no, like we'll see how it goes from project to project.
I think that the Hollywood standard or whatever for when you're starting out is something like 800 to 1,000 per minute of music, of like final, you know, whatever. And then again, you can kind of fluctuate depending on your experience level. Obviously, it has to go higher, and the budget. If it goes low, then once again, you just sort of figure out, well, what rights can I now take? There's also, I didn't mention it, but like percentages of like the game sales. If you a really small team or really low budget, but you really believe in it, then that's another option that you can take. Yeah.
Basically, you're investing, right? You're an investor as well.
You're an investor. Your time is absolutely worthwhile.
That's actually a great approach, a great idea.
But again, if you are starting, actually, you shouldn't ask for anything near $900 per minute. There are way better places to get your first projects together. There are a lot of people who are like profit share or something, and people who are also starting in the game development business. And in the best case, you get to know them, you create a cool first game with them, and their skills will grow, their context will grow, and you will grow with them. And so in the beginning, you can't go like, yeah, but to survive, I need like $500 per minute. So you have to pay that because you don't have anything that won't work, that probably won't work. As I said, I had to work like 5 or 6 years on festivals and stuff to just to allow myself to work during the nights and evenings to kind of slowly but steady create more contacts, as we said in the beginning, and improve my skills and my show reel. And now I lost track on what I was trying to say, but I guess
no, you're absolutely right. I think maybe to rephrase, like what I was saying with like this is the buyout rate is more like a negotiation tactic where it's like
yeah, of course, it was totally right.
What you might end up with is much lower. And in fact, another option that I think someone mentioned kind of earlier, perhaps Antonio, is that like, hey, maybe this game doesn't really need new original music. Maybe your budget is low to the point where I believe in it, but it doesn't make sense for me to spend extra time on this because you just don't have the, whatever. So I've already written this. I think it would work. What do you think? And then they're like, yeah, that actually works really well. Okay, well, here's a licensing fee, which can be much, much, much lower. And you kind of work that way, or maybe like fix up the track like Antonio mentioned. But there's always just kind of things you can play with. I think the bottom line is like just making sure that you're getting something for it. And that something doesn't even have to be, I mean, I've done short film scores for $0, but instead it was like, hey, design my website, deal. And that was perfect. And, design my business cards, deal. That was perfect for the time. And you can kind of do these things, and you're always making sure that you're compensated in some way that's appropriate.
Yeah, and if I may just add one thing, because those guys again, I believe they nailed. It's like try to one thing that helps is like if you're super starting on the very beginning, try to calculate yourself per hours, and say like, okay, I think I'm gonna take like 10 hours to make this music. What's the minimum salary per hour in your area? Let's say it's $15 something. So, push a little bit more and go from there. It's very small, but it's like, of course, if you are absolutely beginning. So if you feel ever lost, like it's another way of also like be very transparent to your client. Maybe your client is also beginning. Maybe it's a group of young people that are just want to making their first game and look like something that came out of some kind of game jam or something. So be honest, like say, hey, listen, man, to do that, I'm gonna need 40 hours. So my price per hour is this, and if I go further, there might be that and that. So it's another way of like kind of some kind of orientation to you if you're like beginning and if you're feeling too scary to like charge per minute, or as Will and Toby say, like be creative is always a good idea.
Yeah, I guess it kind of like also answers to Nicolo. He asked, how do you guys feel about starting, like as working on Fiverr, like selling? I think it kind of ties with what you guys just mentioned. There are several ways of starting it. Fiverr is one of them, or libraries, or so I guess this is answered. There are a couple more questions. We're approaching the end of our incredible panel. It's been really fun to connect with you guys and learn from you guys. But there are a couple of questions here just to finish. Any network groups that you guys would recommend being part of? Any networking or whatever Facebook groups? How do you guys deal with that? What do you think it's important for people to start their endeavors in the gaming industry?
Yeah, you'll have to apologize because I'm going to start plugging stuff, but Game Audio Network Guild, I owe a lot of my successes to joining that group and befriending people from there on like the forums first, and then going to game developers conferences and other meetups and conventions and whatnot, and meeting them in person. So I think it's a wonderful organization, and it's definitely something to consider. There's also the Game Audio Denizens Facebook group, and Game Audio Network Guild also has a Facebook group. But other groups that, depending on your background or if you feel comfortable, there's the Composers Diversity Collective. I think it's just composersdiversitycollective.com. And this is, it's both game composers and film composers, but essentially it's a response to the lack of diversity in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And what a lot of game composers of color have decided was like, well, let's make a big database of all of us so that a producer pretty much can't say, oh no, I couldn't find someone. We have a database now, and you're listed there, and everyone's bio is there, their website, their country of origin, their current location, their languages that they speak, and their skill sets, like what genres and so on. And it's all there. It's actually a really cool website for searching, and it's a great way, I think especially once you're somewhat, you've gotten going in your career a little bit and you're looking to go to the next level. I think that's a wonderful organization to participate in. And lastly, there's a Discord server that I'm on called Blackson Game Audio. It's actually open to everyone. You don't have to be African-American or of African descent to join it. But it's been an invaluable resource for a lot of folks. A lot of like recruiters and stuff will come to give, if there's like internships or whatnot, job postings and business and whatnot, and also just general sharing of ideas and whatnot. So that's another option as well.
Beautiful.
I have one to suggest on top of all of these amazing ones that we recommended is the Society of Composers and Lyricists. It's called, the short is bscl.com. So they are more focused on films, but they have stuff for games as well. And before the pandemic, I've met a lot of, when I moved to Hollywood, because I'm living in the US for 2 years only, I'm pretty new here. I didn't know pretty much anyone, and a friend of mine recommended me this to join this association, and I've met a lot of great composers that end up becoming great friends. Today, I got referred by one of these guys that I meet to work on a project. So I think it's very good as well. And again, they are more focused on music for movie, but they have some stuff for video games. But it's also pretty cool. For me, it was super cool because I ended up meeting Alan Silvestri and Howard Shore.
Oh.
Which for me was like, oh my God, my fanboy side just came out. Like,
oh man, yeah. It's awesome.
I was like, dude, it was like, oh my God, I came all the way from Brazil. Can't believe I meet you, man. It's so cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so great when you meet your heroes, man. It's like, I still want to meet John Williams. Have you guys met John Williams?
No,
No.
I've met George Lucas several times.
Oh my God.
Each time more hilarious than the last, but like John Williams, I've never seen.
Oh man, but George Lucas is also like one of the at least.
Oh yeah, but well, it's outside of the scope of this conversation. But he's like a normal, like cool, just guy, which doesn't come through, I guess, when he's making these billion-dollar franchises left and right. But he's like cool. That's so weird.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Beautiful. And last question. Let me see. I lost it here. Okay, cool. If you could have composed music for any game, past and future, what game would that be?
I have one. You guys, okay, I'll go first. So for me, definitely would be, I have two. Can I say two?
Yeah.
Or just one? Okay, first of all, it was for me the game that I started all was Legend of Zelda. It's my favorite. Legend of Zelda. But I know I'll never be capable of doing like Koji Kondo for me is like the master. And the other one would be Final Fantasy.
Yeah. But that's like, that are two games I of course had in mind too, but I'm not sure if that's really a dream to get into their footsteps, because they already did it in a perfect way, and I wouldn't know what to add actually. Of course, it could be great to reimagine that whole thing, but it's like I'm 90% sure that would you immediately accept it if Nintendo would reach out to you and be like, yeah, we are doing a Majora's Mask remake once again, and we want a completely new soundtrack for that one. Yeah, I wouldn't say no to probably, but it would be pretty hard, I guess, to create something from scratch. So
yeah.
I think it's a very tough question.
Well, like, is there something like that you feel like you know, like if you would be you, like you did it, it's your thing, which one would it be? Would it be like Final? Like, fuck, I wish I had done that score. Wilbert.
Oh, I mean, you know, I love game music, so part of me doesn't want to have written, you know, some of my favorite scores. Like, I don't want to have written, I don't know, Bloodborne, Last Guardian, you know, LA Noire, these amazing scores that I've heard recently, because, you know, that means that I would have had to have suffered through it and all of the, you know, vicissitudes and all of the hardships that went into making it. I just want to enjoy it. So I don't really have a past answer necessarily. But for the future, I don't know, man. Like, I love the Uncharted series so much. I think between Uncharted 2 and Final Fantasy 7 are my favorite games.
Yeah.
So, like, you know,
and the music is so good.
Oh yeah, I mean, Uncharted 2 and 3, actually. Uncharted 3, I forgot how great that score was. But
dude, I gotta say something. I love the Uncharted 4 because I'm a big fan of the franchise as well. But I got a little bit sad that they removed the main theme.
Yeah,
on Uncharted 4.
It was the Captain America Civil War. I forget his Henry Jackman.
Henry Jackman, yeah.
And Lost Legacy, but Greg Edmondson did 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And man, I love. He also did like the Firefly, the sci-fi TV show. And,
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just an amazing sense of color, and I really loved the vibe. It was something that we'd never heard in games before. So yeah, I mean, if Uncharted 5 is up for grabs, then I'm definitely.
Well, let's all like there's
a demo or something.
There's 24 of us now in the room, and there will be people watching later. Let's all screenshot these and tag the producers, the directors.
Oh, please don't do that. No, please don't do that.
That's awesome, guys. Really appreciate your time. Really happy with this conversation. I think that one thing that we all learned is that now we need to film more of our process, just like Toby does, right? And Wilbert, it'll be a little harder for you because your process starts in the shower, right?
It's gonna be
I'll
18
start in
plus.
OnlyFans. I'll start in OnlyFans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll make so much more money than.
Oh,
Right?
God, oh my
Absolutely.
Oh, gosh.
That's
Cut this part out. Cut.
A great show
rid of
for
it.
MTV
let's tag your OnlyFans now.
No.
Yeah.
No. All right. Well, it was a fun career while I had it, but.
So yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much, Toby. Pleasure to meet you guys. TEOLI.
Thank you too.
Wilbert, thank you so much for this. It was really a really fun experience, and I learned a lot. And I'm pretty sure that people who watched and will watch later will also enjoy this conversation. I usually end our panels with music. We used to do Music Cosmos like in a room full of people, right here in LA and in Brazil. And I usually bring one of the performances that we recorded prior to the pandemic, just to kind of like feature a singer-songwriter that we had during the events. So I'll finish with that. Feel free to stay and, watch and listen to these girls singing. If you need to leave, it's fine too. I'll be here until the end. Toby, thank you, brother. TEOLI, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Wilbert, thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Let's keep connected. And let me share my screen again.